you pray with me? God, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of all of our spirits be pleasing in your sight, for you are our rock and you are our Redeemer. So, there is a new sign in the church office, and it reads, "I'm tired." No, I mean I'm vacation Bible school tired. And whoever put that sign up has spent a week at Bible school. It is a very wonderful, happy kind of tired. But it's a tired that gets into your bones and your vocal cords. We are hoping that you all had a great week while we were in the midst of a Bible school here. That's theme was Shipwrecked. So we were pretending that we were wrecked upon an island. We were marooned here, unable to go anywhere because the waves had thrown our vessel onto the rocks and destroyed our ship. Sometimes in life, we feel like we've been weathered by a storm. Many of you been weathered recently? Maybe just that pounding upon the side of your vessel. Sometimes we feel like we've been wrecked. The storm has been so great, the devastation so complete that we would say, I'm just wrecked. This morning at 8:15, we sent off a team to North Carolina. They are going to families that I imagine when they saw their homes after the hurricanes felt wrecked. The unexpected can wreck us. It can cause what we think cannot be moved. Our home, our health, our relationships, our lives. We can find them moved, damaged, rearranged, and that can threaten to wreck us. When it's telling the story, you probably noticed in this passage from Acts, the storyteller is quite rich and vivid. The storyteller wants us to really feel the shipwreck. It says, the wind was against us. We sailed slowly, with difficulty. We were driven, pounded, until all hope of being saved was lost. I think the author understands how quickly this becomes a metaphor for those dark nights of the soul. Those more challenging seasons of our lives when it feels like the wind is blowing against us. Everything we try to do, we muster up the energy and we find ourselves back down on our bottoms. When it's slow going and progress is hard. When we feel like we are just being weathered and pounded. And we fear that hope is lost. I asked the children at Bible school what makes them worry. We used worry instead of wrecked because it's a word that the kids could understand a little more. What causes you to worry? And they have many of the same worries that I think us grown-ups have. They're just a little more generous to share their worries. Some of the children told me that they were worried because a loved one had passed away. Others were worried because a parent or a sibling or someone they care about was sick. Some were worried because they'd moved to a new home and they hadn't made any friends in the neighborhood yet. Some of the kids, a lot of the kids were really worried about whether their teacher this year would be nice. Some of them had heard rumors contrary. So we had to work through, you should give them a chance. Give them a chance. Some of our kids were worried because they hear a lot of fighting at nighttime. Some were worried because there isn't always enough money for food. Some of the kids at Bible school were worried because they don't have a home right now. They're floating. They have the same worries as us. Is there enough to eat? Is there a safe place to sleep? Are my loved ones safe? Am I safe? Are my relationships secure? The kids go through the storms with us, don't they? And we fear at times that we're being wrecked. in the eye of the storm, in that calm that comes sometimes in the midst of a time of turmoil, or in the breath that follows the storm, I think we have the opportunity to learn. There is the opportunity that the turmoil, the storm, the struggle that threaten to wreck us will be able to teach us. Now, I will confess to you that I am not trying to explain the storm. Today's sermon is not about how we got wrecked or why or whose fault it is. That's a whole nother sermon series. We'll do a little of that this fall. But today, I invite us to just simply acknowledge that we all get wrecked sometimes, that we all encounter storms that threaten us and disorient us. But I believe that those storms can also be opportunities for us to get reoriented, to find our feet on new ground with the opportunity to see life with fresh perspective. In the scripture that follows, the one that Denny read, we understand that the sailors that are on the ship with Paul begin to see some land. Their bearings begin to tell them that land is approaching, and so they're getting ready for what comes after the storm. And I want to read for you the process that they go through as they're preparing for the sun to rise, as they're preparing to move from this ship upon which they have been weathered and nearly wrecked for 2 weeks' time. They're getting ready for the sun to rise and the possibility of a new day. And I think that some of what they go through physically can be a metaphor, a teaching for us. How do we move past the wreck, through and beyond the storm? It says, "Since we had been without food for a long time, Paul stood up among them and said, 'Men, you should have listened to me and not set sail from Crete and thereby avoided this damage and loss. But I urge you now to keep up your courage, for there will be no loss of life among you, but only loss of the ship.' When the 14th night had come, as we were drifting across the Sea of Adria, about midnight the sailors suspected they were nearing land. So they took some soundings and found 20 fathoms. A little farther, they took soundings and found 15 fathoms. It's getting shallower. Fearing that we might run onto the rocks, they let down their anchors from the stern, and they prayed for day to come. But when the sailors tried to escape from the ship, they had lowered a boat into the sea on the pretext of putting anchors from the bow. Paul said to the centurion and the soldiers, 'Unless these men stay on the ship, you cannot be saved.' The soldiers thus cut away the ropes from the boat and set that rescue raft adrift. Just before daybreak, Paul urged all of them to take some food, saying, 'Today is the 14th day that you have been in suspense and remaining without food, having eaten nothing. Therefore I urge you to take some food, for it will help you survive, for none of you will lose the hair from your head.' After Paul had said this, he took bread, he gave thanks to God, in the presence of all, he broke it and began to eat. Then all of them were encouraged and took food for themselves. After they had satisfied their hunger, they lightened the ship by throwing the wheat into the sea. In the morning they did not recognize the land, but they noted a bay with a beach on which they planned to run their ship ashore if they could. So they cast off the anchors and left them in the sea. At the same time they loosed the ropes that tied the steering oars. Then they hoisted the foresail to the wind. They made for the beach. But striking a reef, they ran the ship aground. The bow stuck and remained immovable, but the stern was being broken up by the force of the waves. The soldiers' plan was to kill the prisoners so that none would swim away and escape. But the centurion, wishing to save Paul, kept them from carrying out their plan. He ordered those who could swim to jump overboard first and make for land, and the rest to follow, some on planks and others on pieces of the ship. And so it was that all were brought safely to land. So they're preparing to move from the ship to this new reality. And they go through quite a process. First, they put down their anchors and they get their bearings. They put down their anchors, they got their bearings. Denny's granddaughter is the captain of this ship. She tends to captain any space she's in. Those of you who grew up with Ryan know she is a little like her dad. We got to put down our anchors. When we go through a storm, when we fear that we're wrecked, we need to slow down. Sometimes when life is hard, what we want to do is just plow through, right? I'm just going to keep busy. I'm just going to get through it. I think if we're wise, and it's not easy to do, we want to say, we're going through something. This ship is not what it was last week. This family is not what it was last year. My body or my soul has been affected by something. The sailors, they put down their anchors so they can get their bearings, so they can take readings of the depths of the water, so they can discern what comes next, what is wise and safe. I think we are wise to heed the advice of the psalmist who says, be still and know that I am God. When we have experienced a storm, when we have been wrecked by something, stillness takes discipline. Because sitting in the stillness is hard. We come to terms with the readings, with the depths of the grief or the fear or the loss or the challenge. But in that stillness, we find the God who is with us, the God who can lead us to that new land and that new season. Be still. Get your bearings. Put down an anchor. Breathe. The next thing that the sailors wrestle with is, are we sticking together or are we all going our own way? There were some who were quick to put down the rescue raft and said, I'm saving myself. Don't know about the rest of you, but I'm out. Paul says, in order to be saved, we have to stick together. We have to stay together, pray together, find encouragement and strength in each other. When we go through times of turmoil, those are good times to take stock of who's with me. Who's with me? Who are the people that didn't find their own life raft and cut the ropes whenever it got hard? Who is the true friend, the sojourner who is with me when the storms are hard? John Wesley, who was the pioneer, the first voyager of the Methodist movement, he took a ship ride, 2 at least. One who was writing of John Wesley's journeys said John Wesley was on board a ship bound for Georgia, the Georgia colony, in early 1736, when a ferocious storm shredded the mainsail and flooded the decks. So getting the metaphor, you're not surprised that I'm talking about a near shipwreck for Wesley. Many of the English passengers aboard screamed in terror that they would soon be swallowed up by the sea. But a group of Moravian missionaries from Germany calmly sang throughout the squall. They were unafraid of death. The storm showed the true colors of the people on the ship with Wesley. There were some whose faith was shallow. They were pilgrims to a new land, many of them saying it was because of their faith, because of their beliefs that they were journeying. But when the storm came, they had no assurance of God's presence, of God's peace, of God's promise, and so they were terrorized. The Moravians, on the other hand, in the midst of the storm, they buckled down into prayer. A sense of God's assurance, God's promise of salvation began to rise up in them. They were the calm in the storm. This spiritual resource caught John Wesley's eye. And later in his life, after turning back to England, Wesley would continue to go back to the Moravians as those who could provide spiritual stability. It was the journey on the ship that marked Wesley's first significant encounter with the small Protestant movement that would have an enormous influence on his ministry and the Methodist movement he started. We are largely in debt as Methodists to the Moravians, because it was the Moravians that exposed Wesley's own shallowness of faith. You could say, he's the one that founded our denomination. He was scared to death on the ship. He realized that while he had a head religion, he knew all the right answers, he had the theology, he didn't have the heart, the relationship with Christ. Some of you are acknowledging, yes, that is our sweet towel there. In the ship, Wesley had to figure out, who are my true friends? Who are the people I can cling to? Who will lead me to deeper faith? 2 years later, a disheartened Wesley was back in England wrestling with his Christian faith after a miserable time in Georgia. On May 24th, 1738, his friends, the people that were really in the ship with him, his friends prevailed upon him to attend a Moravian Society meeting on Aldergate Street in London. And that night, upon hearing Martin Luther's preface to Romans, Wesley writes, "I felt my heart strangely warmed. I felt I did trust in Christ alone for my salvation." Wesley's spiritual awakening was a turning point for him, for his life. And it began with the Moravians on a ship in the sea. He figured out who the people were who could lead him towards deeper faith. The storms of our lives, the things that nearly wreck us, give us pause to consider who gives us wise counsel. What are the voices that I want to be listening to? If you listen carefully to the story, Paul continually in the storm that on the seas that he was in his own ship, he kept telling them, we have to stop. We cannot go out to sea again. But they didn't listen to Paul. They listened to the centurions. They listened to the people who had the positions of authority, not the persons who were speaking wisdom on the boat. Who gives you wise counsel when you need it the most? And who will lead you into safe harbor and deeper faith? We spend a lot of time with voices, people seeking to influence us in every way. Who are the people that are leading you towards deeper faith? This fall, our church will begin a new type of journey. It's something we've done before called prayer circles. We're going to invite every member of our church to be in a prayer circle. Some of you already have existing small groups, and those small groups can become your prayer circle. But our hope is that every person on our ship will have a circle of friends that will pray you through the storms, who will help you listen to God's voice and seek wise counsel. So they put their anchors down. They took a breath. They evaluated who could advise them and who could lead them off and through the journey. They would invest in those who would lead towards the Lord. Then the Apostle Paul said, we need to eat. I love that advice. Isn't that always good advice to hear? He says, we have been in the midst of this storm for 14 days. Some of you have been wrecked by something, and you know what it is. To be so full of grief or so full of worry that you forget to eat for a time. Paul says, you got to tend your bodies. You need to eat. You need to sleep. Our salvation depends on us having the strength and the energy. The counsel I offer this morning is not only do we need to be still and evaluate and find folks who can give good counsel, but brothers and sisters, we need to tend our bodies so that these bodies are ready to be in God's service, in care of our family, and a sanctuary for us. Are you eating? and sleeping. Perhaps it is a season for us to tend these fleshy selves so that in the long run, we will experience salvation and be able to offer that salvation to others. After they ate, they lightened the ship. They threw everything overboard that they didn't need any longer. They knew whatever came in the morning, they weren't staying on that ship. So they threw everything off so that ship could get them as far as possible towards land. This is our preschool children lightening their ship through a feverish activity involving crepe paper and a lot of squeals. As you have weathered storms and been nearly wrecked, as you take a moment to evaluate your life, what's just weighing you down? What obligations, what commitments, what stuff makes it harder for you to navigate your life? Can it be thrown overboard? They even threw their extra food into the sea because the priority was to get as close to safety as possible. What's weighing you down? What can you throw into the sea to lighten your ship? Lighten your burden and change course when you do wrong. On Thursday at Vacation Bible School, I thought the message would go way over the heads of our children. It was about how guilt can sink our ship. I thought, these are 4-year-olds. They aren't guilty. These are second graders. They don't know shame. How I was wrong. When I asked them what mistakes they had made, oh, Lord have mercy, they could tell me. I realized it's because what children have that we don't is a community of people that tell them the minute they step out of line. It really was a light bulb for me. As soon as a young person begins to speak unkindly, an adult swoops in and says, use kind words. As soon as a young person began to push and shove another kid, a captain swooped in and say, gentle hands. Let's treat our friends with kindness. Sometimes us adults lack that kind of guidance. But I pray that the still small voice in your soul continues to speak and guide you. All of us need to lighten our burden from all the guilt and grief we feel from the journeys that are over. Throw that stuff into the sea. The Apostle Paul was quick to point out to the people on his ship that he had told them so. And if they hadn't pressed on feverishly, they might have been saved in a safe harbor back at home. But he lets it go. He doesn't continue to harp on their mistake. Though they had made one, he lets it go. He forgives those on his vessel so that they can get to solid ground together. The storms, the things that nearly wreck us, they can at times point out what we got wrong, where we made a bad choice, where we've hurt somebody. In those cases, we can do as we instructed the children, get on your knees and pray. Pray that God will forgive you, and God will forgive you. And all that stuff can go down with the ship as you swim to safety. To let ourselves receive God's forgiveness, that we can be unburdened to live. Sometimes our shipwrecks are not of our own making. They're caused just by the course of natural history or by someone else's poor choice. But when the wreck causes us to realize we had some in it, we turn to Jesus for forgiveness and salvation. And then we swim. They did all these things to get as far as they could. They took stock. They got their bearings. They took a moment of silent prayer to evaluate their life. They considered who they would invest in relationships with. They ate to nourish their bodies. They threw off that which was holding them back, and they gave and received forgiveness. And then their ship ran aground on the reef. And they could see where they needed to be. And they swam. They swam to shore. On the final day of Vacation Bible School, we told the best story ever told. It's the story of resurrection. We talked about how Jesus was wrecked by the sin and selfishness of our world, about how his body was crushed, the life stolen from him. And on the third day, the tomb was empty, and Jesus presented himself scarred, but alive. Scarred, but ready to live life in fullness. And he began to collect all those weathered, wrecked people that endured the trauma of his crucifixion and the grief of his death. He began to gather them to himself and say, see, the storm didn't destroy us. It roughed us up, but we're alive. The resurrection proclaims that we get to live a new day. For the sailors with Paul, the sunrise revealed an island, the hope of a new life ahead of them. All they had to do was trust God enough to jump off the sinking ship and swim to shore, to receive the new life, the promise that awaited them, the hope that was promised. All of them swam. We're told not a single soul was lost, not the centurions who had got it wrong, not Paul, who was put on the ship to go to his trial, and not the people just doing their work, sailing the seas. With God's help, friends, the near shipwreck, it can reorient us and lead us towards resurrection. I'm not making light in any way of the storm or the wreck, but I am offering the possibility that we don't have to go down with that ship. Rather, we can see the devastation, we can see the storm as an opportunity to take a breath, to reevaluate, to consider who we want to invest time in, to allow those around us to lead us closer to the heart of God. We can take a moment and eat, sleep, tend our bodies. We can lighten our burdens by casting off what's unimportant. We can receive forgiveness for what's been done. And we can swim in the confidence of resurrection. There is a shoreline ahead, a beautiful life with Christ our Savior awaits us. So the next time you find yourself in the eye of a storm, or just on the edge of it, slow down, get your bearings, be reoriented, because you can resurrect. Amen.